Hello and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
Today we are continuing on with our brush making series. We are doing part 2 today, which will include oil and watercolor brushes. So we'll be going into the wet panel of the Brush Studio settings. Abbie is going to be guiding us through all of it, and I will be following along here and fielding questions. So as we go, be sure to drop any questions that you have in the chat. We'll
be able to answer your questions as we go. So make sure that you ask everything you want to know. Okay. So first up, we're going to make the simplest brush that everybody wants and everybody uses. It's a very simple brush that can be used as a lettering brush, and it's sort of a starter brush, and from there we're going to use that brush to build the rest of the brushes. So you can duplicate that brush as we go and it will change. Okay, so you're going to hit the plus at the top of the brush menu to make a new brush. And we're going to make the spacing a bit closer because the default is 17, which is weird. It's quite far apart. My favorite is about 4. And then we're going to go down to Apple Pencil. We're going to turn off the opacity, pressure, influence. But we do actually want the brush to get bigger and smaller with pressure. So 70-ish is a good number for that. If you are pedantic like me, you can type it in instead. Okay. Now you're left with a really simple, versatile brush that you can, if you want to do lettering with it, you can add some streamline. So you can do that. If you want to draw with it, you can take away the streamline and just make it into a simple drawing brush. It's the only I've ever done. Okay, so we've got a really versatile base brush to start with, and we should probably name it. Let's give it a name. We'll call it Ordinary Brush. Okay.
And so before we get further, I know I said we're going into the wet watercolor and oil brushes in this session, but the other big difference between the first session was we were doing a lot more stamp-based brushes, and these are going to be more painting brushes that you can actually use to paint things and not just as a single stamp or a texture.
Yeah, I've heard these kind of brushes being called dynamic brushes, which are quite nice.
Ooh, yes.
So, okay, so we've got our ordinary brush. So let's duplicate that so we don't have to go through all the rigmarole again. Okay, now we're going to make a watercolor brush. So for the shape, we're going to swap it out. And we're going to go to the source library and pick one of these watercolory ones. So just pick the one that takes your fancy. I'm just going to use Blotch 1. And don't forget to tap done, otherwise it's not going to keep that there. Then for the grain, we're going to go and we're going to choose from the source library one of these papers that looks like it's got a mess on it. So stained paper 1 is a good one. This one is also very nice. Let's just do this one. Okay, and done. So it stays there. Now, see, it's not watercolory at all. It's just a black brush. So to get that watercolor vibe, we need to go and make sure in the rendering first up, when you make a watercolor brush, it needs to be on intense blending. Uniform blending. Uniform blending. Focus on that. Because when you do wet mix, if it's not on uniform blending, you'll see some weird kind of artifacts in your brush stroke if you're making a watercolor brush. So we'll head off to wet mix. So at the top, the dilution slider is could basically be called water in this case. And the charge slider could be called paint. So if you're making a watercolor brush, you always want your dilution to be higher than your charge. So we're just going to whack it up to maximum. And then we're going to set the charge to 60. Then this slider here, yep.
In charge, I believe, when you say it's like paint, it behaves as though you've dipped your brush in paint and you're running it on paper, not that the paint stays continually on the brush at the same level. It's at the start of the stroke.
Exactly. Then attack is how much more paint you can add with pressure throughout the stroke. So I usually, for a watercolor brush, don't want too much extra pigment to be added as I go. So I'm going to set it to about 20. And then the pull means how much of the pigment that you started with is going to travel with you, and how much water is going to smudge up whatever was underneath. So if you have pull all the way at maximum, it makes sure that what you started with here goes with you the whole way. If we drag it back down to, let's say, 50, what you start with here is going to peter out as you go.
So,
and the water will take over and start pulling the whatever you've got underneath it as well.
Does pull, okay, that was going to be my question. If it affects the stroke that you've only painted or the strokes beneath it as well?
No. So if you put pull on 100, it's going to pull the pigment that you added at the beginning all the way across what's underneath it. And you're not going to see that nice mixing. So if you put pull on 50, it'll pull some of the pigment you started with and then also begin to pull what's underneath it. And then the last thing is grade, put it up to smooth, because you don't want this to be choppy. If grade is not on smooth, you can see a choppiness in the stroke, which you don't, you can't enlarge this pane, but you don't want that with a watercolor brush. Okay, let's head back to rendering. Now we want some wet edges, like a watercolor paint might leave in if you're painting with it. And we'll just whack that up to maximum. Okay, let's see what we've made. Let's grab some blue. Whoops, too tiny. Let's make it big. Okay, that looks pretty cool. But I think the edges are a bit too uniform. So I'm going to head back to my shape and I'm going to scatter the edges of the shape. So the shape is going to be moving around as you pull the brush. And then to add some
scatter at maximum there?
Yes, I did put it at maximum. And then to change the edges even more, you can head over to dynamics and you can bump the slider up to 50. Let's type it in. And that will mean that the edges are now nice and irregular because the shape gets bigger and smaller as you pull it. Okay, I'm just going to head down to properties and make my brush nice and big. Okay. Now let's have a look what this looks like. Clear that layer. And see. Okay, so let me just tell you what I'm doing here. I'm pressing hard and you can see the color, and then I'm pressing softly and pulling it away. See, nice.
Beautiful.
Okay, now let's put another color over the top to see how that pull effect works. So we start, and then you can see it starts to mix it to purple because you've allowed the pull to not only be all the pink. So if you'd put pull on 100, you would pull pink all the way to here. So
and would you still have, sorry, would you still be able to see the blue hard edge underneath if the pull was at 100?
I'm not sure. Let's have a look. Let's change it to 100 and see. Where am I? Let's start on the edge here. See, the pink doesn't pull any of the blue with it.
Okay.
It's just a thin screen of pink over the top. So that's why the trick is to make pull be 50%-ish. You can make it even less if you want a very pronounced watery brush. So let's leave that one on 50. Okay, so now you have a pretty decent watercolor brush. Let's name this one. I spell color like that because I'm right. Okay. Next, we're going to make a watercolor brush that's streaky. So, for example, if you have like a sable brush, I had one on my desk the other day, that you're dragging pigment, and the little the hairs of the brush are pulling the paint with them. So we're going to duplicate our watercolor brush again. And now, because we want it to pull, we don't want that shape to jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. So we're going to turn off scatter. We're going to go to dynamics and turn that off. And then we're going to go and change this shape, because this shape is fine for this, but we want something that's going to look more like a brush stroke. So let's go to the source library. These ones are okay, but I actually quite like this one. It's called Ink 2. And then let's turn it that way so that our stroke goes like that, because don't forget, the right-hand side of the shape pane is your leading edge of your brush. Okay, let's see how this looks here. See, it already has that brush feathers look in it. So
very cool.
As it goes. Okay. And then also another way that you can make a streaky brush even more streaky is you can influence it by making the grain not be regular. You can make the grain smear out by moving the rolling down to a lower. So can you see, hang on, it's not very clear. Let's make the preview size bigger so you can see. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, that's not very bright. But as you drag the movement slider to the left, the shape of the grain elongates within your stroke. And so as you can imagine, you're getting a sort of lines effect happening in your brush stroke. So let's find a nice dark color so you can see.
Okay.
And if you want, if something is, this bothers you, I don't know if you can see you see these little,
oh yes,
now that is from the stamp being at 4 apart from each other. If you don't like that at all, it's not that obvious sometimes, but if that's bothering you, you can head over to stroke path and you can put it on 0. You won't be able to make your brush as big as if you had it on 4, but it will completely eliminate that. It's still
that's a huge difference.
but it's much better.
Yeah, so much better.
Okay, so now we've made two pretty decent brushes. Let's go and name that one as well. So this one is called watercolor. Let's call it watercolor stroke.
Let us know in the chat if you're following along. And again, if there's any questions that you have as you go, or if you, I know we have, Jenny said that she missed last session. And so if there's any questions that you have that are, just about like what these things are that we're talking about and not explaining, like shape or grain, feel free to ask.
Okay, and then the next brush we're going to make is an oil brush.
Before we move on from oil, really quick, Pink Tree Portfolio asked, if it helps to have real watercolor experience when making these brushes.
Yes, well, I mean, it can't harm you. If you if you know the look that you're trying to achieve, it's much easier to get there than if you have no idea. So you don't actually have to be painting with watercolor to have an idea of the look that you're going for. You can go on Pinterest and you can just like binge a whole lot of watercolor images. I've actually got a Pinterest board which is all watercolor. Let me
Ooh.
find it. Let me find
Well,
it.
and it's totally okay to just experiment. And if you're playing around with these different shapes and grains and the settings, you'll likely find that you learn a ton just doing that. But like Abbie said, if you know what look you're going for, if you're trying to achieve something specific, it definitely helps to know what that is.
Yes. So I've got this Pinterest board. Shall we link it in the description?
Yeah.
This Pinterest board is zillions of pictures of watercolor. And the reason I go and digital hoard watercolor pictures is because I want my digital watercolor to be as convincing as possible. So if you look at things that make watercolor characteristic, like for example, here in this one, this lovely shape here in the middle of this flower, you can see those edges, and looking over here at this edge here, over there, and these edges around here, those are very typical. And it's if you want your digital work to look analog, it's really important to sort of what's the right word? I don't know, hack it so that it's got that vibe. So if you want,
something that occurred to me too is that some of these artists that you've pinned likely use techniques or different materials that you don't or don't have access to. And so I think that gives a better variety.
Yeah, it does. Exactly. And also, I haven't painted a massive amount with watercolor, analog, but I have painted an enormous amount on my iPad. And I've tried to channel as much of that analog look as possible. So if you guys want to go and look at this Pinterest board, you're more than welcome to go and binge it.
Yeah, okay. I've linked it in the chat and I will add it to the video description at the end.
Cool. Oh, where were we? Oh, we were going to make an oil brush. So we've done a watercolor stroke brush, this bad boy. So now we want that stroke to be less transparent and more gooey looking. So what we're going to do is, to make it darker, we'll change the rendering to intense blending. Okay. And that gives us a much darker stroke. We'll turn off wet edges, because wet edges actually makes your whole brush stroke a tiny bit transparent, no matter what kind of brush it is. And then we'll head into the Apple Pencil. And there's this really nice function called bleed. The way that bleed works is it allows the pressure of your brush to interpret the different tones in your shape and grain. So if you have a very light gray, you'll have to press very hard for that to register as a mark in your brush. If you have a black, that will register immediately. So it allows you to create a stroke that looks like you have feathered your brush across the surface of the paper. Ooh. So you know how if you take an oil brush and it's loaded with paint and you very lightly stroke it across the paper, it just leaves that sort of scrape of pigment. So that's what bleed allows you to do. See?
Oh, that's
And then
very
if you
cool.
harder, then it will fill in the pigment. Okay. And now, because we want it to look like an oil brush, we can head back over to wet mix. And for oils, you kind of want the dilution to be a little bit less than the charge or very close, because unless you want it to look like you're using a lot of linseed oil or something like that. Okay, so we'll put the dilution slightly below the charge. And the pull is still at 50%. Let me just check my notes. I'm actually going to put the dilution a little bit lower. Okay. Now you've got a brush that's quite pigmented and will pull a little bit of that color from underneath it. Can you see the navy blue has been pulled with the pink?
Yeah, that looks really cool. That looks super realistic.
Yeah, and that's a very, very easy brush to make. Now, and if you want to make, let's go and rename this brush into oil brush. And we can duplicate that. Now, if you want it to look a bit ragged, like a little bit messy, sort of like a slightly more aggressive stroke, you can go and change in the stroke path. You can give it a tiny bit of jitter, not too much, otherwise it looks a bit wonky. And you'll see that, and in the dynamics, you can add a little bit of size change. And you'll see that the brush starts to look a bit less clean on the edges. Can you see?
Yeah.
Let me give it some black so that you can see nicely. Now, the brush shape in these kind of brushes is not that critical. So if you want a brush where the middle of the brush is darker than the edges, go and find a shape that that you like, that looks like that in here. So for example, this one. So this is going to give you dark middle of your brush, and the edges are going to be a little bit more feathery.
And that was one of the charcoal shapes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
See. And then if
yeah,
you
that
want
combined with that jitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you want a really open, scratchy brush, go and find one where there are only a few little bits of black in their brush shape. So this one is a good one. So all those gaps are going to look like gaps in your brush. You see,
Oh, yeah.
like a really streaky guy.
Very cool.
Do we have any questions? Because I've run out of...
We really breezed so quickly through that. Yeah. I think we have mostly answered the questions as we've gone, because I typed out a couple answers as well, but do we want to start?
Should we make some again?
Yeah, I was going to say, do we want to start from the beginning again?
Yeah. Okay. We'll make a watercolor brush again from the beginning. Okay, we're going to choose the shape. This time, let's choose a different shape from the source library. Let's see how it works with this shape here. That's nice because it's got those sort of bleedy edges. Let's grab the grain and we'll go and get this one. Okay. Then we're going to go and set our rendering to uniform blending and whack on the wet edges. Let's go to the wet mix. Add our dilution, a little bit of charge, some attack, whack down the pull so that it actually pulls stuff. Grade to smooth. Oh, Apple Pencil, we don't want the opacity. And then actually we'll leave the spacing at 17 so that we can make a really big brush. Okay, and let's go and scatter our shape and make it change size. Okay, what have we made?
Ooh.
That's pretty cool. What if we want to make it so that it's the kind of brush that you push down hard on and it makes a big smudge of paint?
Yeah.
So let's increase the size response. Let's see how that looks. There we go. So that,
oh, that's very, very
that
cool.
creates like a little bloom of watercolor on your page.
So can you then smudge with that brush?
Yes, I think you probably could. Let's put something down to smudge. Where am I? It's this brush. Long hold on smudge to swap from your paintbrush to the smudge tool with the same tool. So I was on whatever this brush is called that we just made, and I want to use that as a smudger. So I easily just go long hold on the smudge and it swaps it for me.
Such a good shortcut.
Ooh, that is very nice. Look at that.
Oh, wow. And so you didn't have to make any adjustments to that brush to make it smudge, right?
No, no adjustments at all. There is if you want to have an influence over the way that it smudges, the place where the way that smudging is affected is on the brush menu is here at, let's make it massive, on the smudge tool. So if you wanted to drag everything you touch to a new place, you put it on maximum. It works exactly the same as pull, actually. And if you wanted to drag some, but not all, put it on about 50. The default is usually about 70, I think. So let's see what 50 does as a smudge tool. That's pretty cool. See, this one was on 70, and this one, let's go back to. So this one is on 50% smudge. And let's whack it up to 100% smudge. It should make a really, see, it kind of drags is more white in that direction. See, the white is less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have another question here. How did we learn all of these, or you, Abbie, especially after the big update of the Brush Studio?
I just spent ages fiddling with it. I think the same way as you learn anything, you just mess around with it and see what works and see what doesn't work and see why it works and see what it influences. Because all of these little sliders and whatever have some sort of influence on the brush, but not all of them influence it in this to the same degree or as you're expecting them to. So if you play around, you usually get the hang of it.
Yeah, I was also going to say, let me share my screen here. If you go to the Procreate Handbook,
that is a gold mine of information.
Procreate.art is the Procreate website. Oh, let me straighten my iPad here. And then if you, at the very bottom, select the Procreate Handbook here. This is just a wealth of information, and it's searchable, which is super handy. So if you have a specific question about what one term means, then you can look it up, and they have like all of the gestures, and it's a really great resource.
Yeah. You can actually download it, and I have it in iBooks.
Oh,
so I don't need the internet to look at it.
That's awesome. I also like that you can save previous versions and see what has changed. It's like so obvious when you go a few versions back how very different the app is these days.
Yeah. Some of the first tutorials that I made look so different now, and I wonder if people can still follow them.
Yeah. When I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right, Anna or Anna, but when Anna mentioned the big Brush Studio update, that was such a huge change. Probably one of their biggest changes.
Oh, with that in mind, shall I show you how to use the color dynamics to really kind of make your watercolor brushes amazing? So go back to your first watercolor brush that you made and go to color dynamics.
Angel's Song also asked about the hard edge watercolor brush, and so this is the hard edge brush that we made because they came late, and so this brush that Abbie is demonstrating in when you watch the replay, it's the first brush that we made.
Does she mean one that isn't feathery around the edge? So one that's smooth I can show you how to do the smooth around the edge one. Let me first show you the color dynamics, and then we'll make a smooth around the edge one. So color dynamics are great, but they're like perfume. If you put on way too much perfume, you just don't want to go near. I mean, nobody wants to come near you. So don't go for slider all the way. Use a tiny bit, and a little bit goes a long way. So stroke color jitter is what you'd probably get the best effect out of with watercolor brushes. If stamp color jitter means that as you drag your pencil, every stamp is going to be a different color. And that's going to look a bit weird. Let me show you what that looks like. So can you see it goes like turquoise, blue, and it does it in a sort of it looks sort of like a neon light flashing effect. It's not great.
Yeah.
So
can you turn it up all the way to show the intensity of it?
Oh, yes. See, it's just weird. I mean, it's sort of, if you want to make a unicorn brush, go for your life. But if you want to make a watercolor brush that's going to look like watercolor, what's going to work really well is to vary the color between strokes. So stroke color jitter means that this stroke is going to be that color, and then the next stroke that you do is going to be a tiny bit different. And that's helpful because when you're painting with real watercolor, when you take your paintbrush back to your palette, you might smudge it next to a bit of yellow, even though it's blue, and then bring it back, and it has that really nice sort of accidental look about it. So we're going to add a tiny bit, maybe 5. If you go too far, you're going to end up with this, which is not really what you're after.
Yeah, because it's random, and so you don't have the control.
Yeah, exactly. So see, that's turquoise, slightly bluish, and it's just enough that it's interesting and not violent. So let's have a look at that here. So can you see the difference? It's very minor, but it's nice. And then you can mix them together and make it feel realistic.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question with this brush. If you want, here, I'll show it on the screen here, about adding the just water without color. And so that would be dilution, right?
Yes. So if you want to turn this into a watering brush, head over to Wet Mix and turn off Attack and Charge. Now, attack means how much you add with pressure. So you've eliminated the option of adding color, and charge means you've eliminated the fact that there's color in the first place. So here we go. And then we'll go to that one that we'd made with just water. See, now this is just water mixing.
Yeah, that's very cool. And you can play around.
Nothing's going to show. Yep.
You can play around too if you want it to look like there's just like a tiny bit of paint at the beginning, or if you're almost painting with like your dirty water. If you want that look, you can increase the charge and attack.
Yes. Okay, let's make that hard edge watercolor brush that isn't fluffy. So let's duplicate this one that we started with. And it's all about the shape. So head in here. And we're going to import a shape that's not so jagged. But it also needs to be fuzzy around the edge, because the fuzzier the edge of your shape, the more pronounced that thick black or darker line around the edge of a wet edge brush is. If it's super sharp, you don't actually get that line at the wet edge. So let's pick this medium hard, which is just a white dot with a fuzzy edge. And now let's turn off our size changing. Okay, go back here. There you go.
Oh, that's beautiful.
If you want it even more pronounced, let's go and find a shape that's got an even fuzzier edge. Maybe this one. Okay, let's see. There you go. That's got a really dark edge.
Yeah.
So just remember the wet, what's it called? The wet edges slider. If you want to use that, pick a shape with a fuzzy edge and it'll give you a nice outcome.
Which is kind of counterintuitive. You would think for the hard edge, you would want a sharp edged shape.
Let's rename this one. There you go. Hooray.
Okay, another question. Sorry, I was reading it. Your favorite eraser for watercolor, if you want a dark hard edge, is it possible?
Yes, I actually we'll make one. Let's make that eraser that you can use for watercolor. So head to your ordinary brush that you made right in the beginning. Duplicate it. And it's all about having a jiggly edge, because when you look at watercolor, where the color meets the paper is never a nice clean line. And if you're looking at digital watercolor and you see a clean line, your brain immediately goes, that's not real. So you need to make it wibbly. So that you can achieve by going to the shape and then go to the source library and pick this one that looks like an eye. It's called oval. Okay. Now it's just going to be in one orientation unless we add some scatter. And can you see it's immediately wibbly on the edges?
Yeah.
Now, if you want it even more wibbly, head to dynamics and you add some size jitter. Let's give it like 40. Yes, I will type it in. And now let's do, we've got this going. And then we want same thing for if you want to swap from your brush to your eraser. I have ordinary one picked here and I want it to be the eraser and I couldn't be bothered to go to eraser and search for it. I just do a long hold on the eraser and it says erase with current brush. So here we go. There's your wibbly edge with your eraser.
And I think the effect is that much more accentuated when you're using a paper texture layer on top.
Well, last week we made a paper texture layer. Let's add that paper texture that we made last week. Let's find it here. This is the one that we made from the Unsplash image that Addie imported. If you didn't watch that, go and watch it because it'll show you exactly how to make the paper texture brush. And Addie has an amazing hack on just whipping it out from Unsplash and using it. So we're going to head for gray, the mid-tone gray, right in the middle, come on, Dot, of the classic color picker. Head to the top, fill the screen. There's our texture. Duplicate it. Make the top one color burn, the bottom one linear burn, and about 10%, 20%. This is the only place in Procreate at the moment where you can't type in your value, and it drives me nuts.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So we've got this lovely texture on our watercolor. We've got our hard edge watercolor brush. We've got our wibbly edged eraser, and we're doing well.
And I don't know if the question was also to recreate the darker hard edge. But I don't know if that specifically is possible because with an eraser, you're always removing pigment. And so you're not necessarily pushing the pigment over or squishing it, if that makes sense.
I think maybe using a brush as a smudge tool might give you the look that you're going for. So you wanted to do something where you push the... No, it still doesn't give you a hard edge because with all reductive things like smudge and erase, you're taking stuff away. I don't think you could get a hard dark edge with an eraser.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind that would maybe replicate what you're trying to achieve would be something like warp or liquefy, where you're actually just moving all of the pixels over.
Like this. So the hard
and it doesn't necessarily give you the same precision that you would get by using an eraser brush, but that'll give you the hard edge.
Yeah, let's move that hard edge around with, oops, let's make it little. Hey, it's still there and it's working great.
Yeah.
You're a genius, Addie.
And one of the more recent updates, you can add all filters and all filter options to the quick menu. And so if you want to access liquefy with just like a flick of your finger, you can add that to your quick menu.
My quick menu is I do this one and it's all there. I love the quick menu. It's the absolute best.
It's such a game changer.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that
set up as well.
Yeah. And once you get into it and add it to your workflow, and if you have one core set menu that you use, it's just like, it's like flying. It's so fast. I always try to do a ton of like learning new shortcuts all at once. And I have to like remind myself to slow down and memorize one at a time and incorporate that and then move on to the next one.
Yeah. What do you have in your quick menu?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let's see. So I have several quick menus set up, and I most recently was playing around with different tools that I maybe wanted to access. So this is new, that I added the paint and eraser options here.
What do those mean? If you press paint, does it take you to your paintbrush?
Yeah. So it'll choose whatever brush I was using last.
Okay.
And then I also have my quick menu set up so that I can see if I can remember off the top of my head. I hold my modifier button and touch my finger to the screen and swipe in the direction of the button, which makes it easy to switch between commands like that. You just have to remember the location of the button.
Oh, I see. Okay. So if you open quick menu, then you have, let's say you have liquefy. So swipe towards liquefy and it will take you to the liquefy menu.
Oh, yes. But if I'm off on my direction, I just added a new layer. Oh, what is, okay.
It's having a bad moment.
Oh, okay, there we go. I finally got it. And those diagonal swipes are what I'm finding to be tricky if I mostly use like the up and down. So I always swipe up for a new layer. And maybe it's just partially the angle that I'm at. But I have several other ones set up. So my always forever favorite brush set is the pencil, paint, and paper set that Abbie made. And I chose my favorite brushes from here, the ones that I was using the most frequently, so that on projects where I was using several different brushes, I was able to more quickly switch between them. And then I have like several set up, but the most frequent ones I use are the pencil, paint, and paper brushes, switching between them, and my new standard workflow tools.
So you actually have more than one quick menu set up?
Yeah, right now I have 4.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I didn't know you could set up more than one.
Yeah, that was a 5X update, and you just add the plus sign. And as far as I know, you can add as many as you want.
That's amazing. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish like I kind of want more options within this. I don't know how you would do that with swiping in the directions, but like if I could just easily access 10 options, I would. So the multiple menus is a good backup.
Cool.
So another good question is, how did you know each other, if you want to share?
Which know each other?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
So yeah. So I could start because I found Abbie's post on the Procreate forums when I'd first gotten an iPad.
That was so long ago. That was like 2016.
Yeah. And I found, well, because it was like it still is one of the most popular posts in the free brushes section.
Yeah.
It's like forever consistently at the top because people keep commenting on it. So that's how I found your brushes.
Unconvincing watercolor.
Yeah. And I think the brushes are still there, right?
Yep, they are. They're still there.
Yeah. So that's how I got introduced to your brushes, and like looking for that watercolor look. So yeah, years and years ago, that's how I found Abbie. I think I sent you a DM on Instagram saying how much I loved your brushes.
And then we've sort of been in the same sort of circles on Instagram for ages. And then I really wanted to chat to Addie one day, so I sent her a message and said, "Can we do a Zoom call?" You must have thought I was nuts.
No, I was like starstruck because, like, you know, you were this brilliant person, and I have learned so much from you, from your tutorials, from using your brushes. So I was really starstruck and super excited.
Well, that was awesome. It was a really good idea. I'm so glad that we're doing this.
Yeah, I love doing this. This is just like a total delight.
And what's also really nice is there's so few people who do this sort of weird job that we do, where you go on the internet and sell digital stuff. And like your family will say, "What do you do for a living?" Or, you know, "How is it going at your job?" and you can't explain it because you're going, I'm selling pretend things to people and telling them how to use them. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who actually understands.
Yeah. And like, I feel like, you know, my family and friends that I do talk to about it, they indulge me. My husband listens when I talk about this Procreate update, but it's so different when you talk to somebody that gets it. And
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and being able to like bounce ideas and different techniques and like workflow hacks, that's just been so much fun.
It has been awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we answered the questions. I will add all the links that we mentioned to the description right afterward. Unless there's anything else. Oh, this is a really good comment. It's nice to feel a connection and no competition at all with a fellow artist, and that is so true. I think that phrase, community over competition.
Yeah. It's used so flippantly. People just like throw it out there and then stay very competitive, and that it freaks me out. So it was really nice to meet Addie.
And I think with social media and having things be like that kind of distant, less interactive space, it can be easy to slip into feeling like the comparison trap all the time.
Exactly.
And so having that face-to-face time and just like getting to know Abbie, getting to make those like real life connections, eliminates all of that comparison.
It does.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us.
And I hope that you're going to enjoy your brushes that you made.
Yes. Definitely tag us if you paint things with these new brushes that you've made. And as always, you can DM us on Instagram any questions that you have. We have a third session planned. And so keep an eye out for that. We'll post on social and email lists. We'll be getting into the depths of combined brushes, which will be huge.
That's the minefield. Hold on.
Yes, there's lots to do there. So that'll be in a couple weeks, but we'll promote it and link everybody to it when we schedule it.
Cool.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys next time.